Hello, everyone, and welcome to the whiteboarding session from Web3 Auth. This is the first time we are doing this, and we are very excited about this. We came up with this idea during our offsite recently and thought to do it in a pretty decent way over here. So, we have a very special guest over here to do the whiteboarding session with us. But before that, we'd like to welcome the host for the show. It's not me this time, it's actually our CEO, Zen. And so let's bring up Zen over to the stage right now. Hey Zen, how's it going?
Hello. Going well. Thanks for setting all of this up, Yash.
Yeah. So Zen, it's the first time you're coming over to a YouTube. So would you like to introduce yourself a bit, please?
Yeah, no, I'm Zen. I'm one of the co-founders of Web3 Off. Um, Thanks for listening to our YouTube channel, and please like and subscribe.
That's a nice plug-in over there. Perfect. So now let's welcome our very special guest over here, a very good friend of mine. I met him recently in Paris and we just hit it off, and that's how this whole thing came into being as well. Let's welcome Sanchay over here. Hey Sanchay,
Hey
how's it going?
guys!
Hey,
Oh,
Sancho.
it's going amazing. Hello
Right.
everyone. This is Sanchay. I'm from Connext and a product manager come engineer, mostly doing engineering work. So yeah.
Nice. That's awesome. Perfect. So what's the plan over here, Zen? What are you thinking about doing with the whiteboarding session?
So, so to set some context for everybody, I think Sanche and I were also we were talking in Paris, and we are talking a little bit about Connext. And I mean, we've Connext has been around for some time, and initially Connext was about state channels, uh, and since then it's pivoted to being interoperability between different chains in a multi-chain world and a multi-chain ecosystem. So, Connext recently launched an upgrade to their bridge called in a hard fork called Amarok, and I think Sancha and I think we can perhaps start the call with setting some context and bringing some of the listeners up to speed with regards to uh, maybe me reciting what I remember from our conversation about the architecture of Connext. And correct me where I'm wrong, of course. And then we can talk about Amarok and how that brings in Nomad, how that brings in some of the other how architecturally that's different from the current structure and how it fixes some of the perhaps liquidity efficiency issues and improves on liquidity efficiency uh, in the next setup. How does that sound, Sanjay?
Sounds amazing to me.
Talking about that for a moment, actually, I just wanted to ask Sanchay, can you introduce to our listeners to what Connext is and what you all do over there?
Sure. Connext, we have been here for like 3 to 4 years. Always have been into interoperability. We started with state channels. We launched like multiple products which have been related to uh, doing uh, doing micro payments, and then we pivoted towards the bridging, and now we have interchain contracts which are running the bridge fully trustless, and now we have trust minimized solution which is going to be Amarok. It's going to be a hard fork for the NXTB. That's what we are naming right now because all the contracted trusts are going to change. So all the liquidity will be moving, and with multiple new features which are coming in. So that's why we named it Amarok. No
What does
story
Amarok?
behind it.
Cool. So with this, let's start this session. So I'll actually hop off and let you both actually take the stage right now. And also add your screen over here, Zen. So let's do this. Let's start this whiteboarding session. Looking forward to it.
Thanks, Yash. So let's start, Sante, with me just kind of like reciting and remembering the Connect bridge as it is today. Not as it is today, as it was. And then we can talk about some of the upgrades, some of the issues or the opportunities that you guys saw in improving the architecture, and then what Amrock really brings as well. So, for those of you out there who, uh, so like Connext is a bridge, and there are many different ways of doing bridges in the crypto space. There's your typical way, the most the most initial way, and the most, I guess you could say, well-known way at this point in time, because it's been the simplest, is a kind of like a distributed trusted setup for an interoperability bridge. So it's one example of this. I think the most popular, I'm not sure what's the most popular chain, but at least one of the more OG ones in my head is WBTC, right? And WBTC works this way, where you have two chains. You have Ethereum and you have Bitcoin on one side, and you basically there's a trusted set of nodes, of operators, bridge operators. So these could be like I don't know, maybe 5 people or 9 people, and you do a 5 out of 9 of these bridge operators, and basically these 5 out of 9 control deposits. I mean, mints on the ETH chain for any deposits that happen to a particular address on the BTC side into what you would say like kind of like a script or a multi-sig setup. So a multi-sig setup here. And then we do, and for every 100 BTC or 1 BTC that's minted, and that's deposited into this multi-sig, it basically wraps it and mints a WBTC on this side. On the smart contract that we'll have here. So yeah, so this is how WBTC works, right, Sanchay?
There are multiple bridges. This is like, I would say, one of the initial implementation, which was because this is not really secure. Because we are basically depending on like 9 people who are hosting the infra to actually provide this information from one chain to another. Basically reading BTC and providing it on ETH that, okay, there is a BTC which is mine. How we are basically trusting these 9 people to actually, and we are relying on half of them to be actually honest, more than half. So that
it's basically custodial to that threshold up here.
Exactly.
And but this was one of the very initial implementations of WBTC and was quite popular for a while. It's also how some of the bridges between BSC and Ethereum work today. You know, a lot of the simple bridges, it's done either via Binance or some sort of multi-sig like we have here. Now, Connext does things on a more trustless level. So they don't have this party over here. Instead, they require smart contract capabilities on both sides. And so, for example, let's draw what's the biggest? It's Polygon right now, right? Is it?
Yeah, Polygon.
So let's do Polygon here. So between L1 and L2, both of them must have smart contract capabilities. Basically, what Connext does is there are 2 smart contracts. One of them that lives on the Ethereum chain, and the second one that lives on the Polygon chain. Now, let's just talk about a one-way bridge at this point in time. Let's just try to talk about Ethereum being converted to and being represented in Polygon. Now, how this bridge works is first first we have a deposit that goes into first we don't have a deposit. First we have a bid registrar, and this happens off chain. Correct me if I'm going to.
No, you're going very correct about this. This is the current version we have, NXTP. NXTP v0.
XTP v0. Okay, that's what it's called. Okay.
NXTP v0. NXTP.
NX.
Yes.
So, oh, for Connext, of course. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, uh, so I'm actually not gonna put the steps here, but basically we have some off-chain. What do you guys call them? What do you guys call the off-chain
Router. We
router?
call them router. Yeah.
Okay. So you have off-chain routers,
Mhm.
which are basically servers which coordinate the different parties who want to buy who want to basically convert funds across different bridges. So the first step here is a router, and a user will first send a bid to a router.
No. User basically sends a request to the router. This is a part with an XCP v0 where we do auction. Basically select, because there are multiple routers, more than like 20, 30, 40 routers which are available. And these
Yep.
routers are basically liquidity provider, which are hosting infra, which basically watches the information on both of these chains, the origin one and the destination one. So what
Right. So
happens
these routers
basically,
are actually the counterparty.
yes, you can say
Okay.
that. So
So
once you, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
no. So it's not a bid. It's a request to a router in
Yes,
particular.
by the
Uh,
user is basically sending this request, and
but
router will be sending the bits to the user.
right. So but that means that I as a user need to talk to literally. I send this request to all of the routers at this point in time, right?
Yes,
Because I want the
yes,
best bid. So I send
right.
to all of the routers saying, hey. So this is kind of like it's called request, but I'm just going to extend it to request for bid,
Mhm.
right?
Yes,
And I send this basically to all of the routers. So I've drawn a multiple stack here, so we can have more routers.
right.
And what these routers, this request for bid, right, contains a amount.
Origin, domain, destination, amount.
Origin and domain, meaning basically
So
where
what we did is that we created this terminology in this ecosystem where we want to make sure, because all the networks can't be defined under a chain, because there is side chain, you have optimism, arbitrum. So we have this rollups, L1, L2 side chains. So what we did is that we defined them under domain. So basically, we are saying them, instead of chain, we are saying them domain. So origin domain is that way from where you are starting, and destination should be where you want to end up. So here is this origin domain, and we have destination domain. So these
Okay.
are the two things which you provide for sure, and the amount when you are trying to request to a router.
Got it. So
Amount
basically,
with the asset you want
right.
to from move from one chain to another.
And this might be like 100 ETH. I'm rich.
Yeah.
So this request for bid basically gets sent to all the different routers, and this is
Yes.
actually all signed as well. So
Not by the user. The user doesn't really have to sign. Routers are just responding to any requests which are coming.
okay, so this is just basically like a GET request at this point.
Yeah. Yeah.
No signature here.
No
Okay.
signature.
Now, after we request for the bid, these routers respond back with a bid, basically, and this
Right.
bid looks somewhat like, and this one is signed, right?
This one is signed by the router. Router basically checks that if they can support the liquidity transfer size which is requested by the user, and checks that if it is possible, then they reply with a signature where they are putting out the money, which
And
will be given to the user.
I assume to keep things simple, it's basically just signed like this, literally.
Yeah, they mention the amount which they can give on the receiving side, and the whole this transfer size, whatever the params are there, that are signed by the router, so we can verify that okay, router agreed to this whole amount.
Got it. So this whole thing is basically signed.
Yes.
It looks very similar to the request for bid. And of course, this amount changes. You might accept a couple of bids for the amount that you want, whatever. But let's just assume, for simplicity's sake, that's 100, one router picked. And there's also price, right? So how is that factored in?
Right. So this price is all watched by router. So what router provides in this bit is that it will provide the amount which will be given to the user on the receiving side. So it will provide like maybe 90, 90, 95. I mean, we are talking about each, so it would
Right.
be like
So
99.5 or something.
yeah, let's just say this router is a very expensive router. So it's 5 each.
No, the fees is same for all the routers, which is set to be 0.05%.
Oh, it's the same for all routers. But
Yes.
I, as a router, what's stopping me from just charging a different price? Perhaps I have a lot of
Well, they
liquidity.
can change the off-chain code, but we do the verification on the SDK side where the user are interacting. So we can make sure that okay, nobody's charging like more than the fees they should be. We have a slippage system, which is like a sanity check, but all
Right.
off-chain. Yeah.
Because you basically want this to be algorithmically priced instead of like user chosen in an order book style.
Right, right. We
Okay.
want to make sure that a user can actually check. So even if our off-chain mechanism is failing, but in that case, a user can actually check that okay if it is right or not. We are
It's
basically
what,
talking
5
about
basis points?
these
Or
nodes.
it's 5 basis points or what?
0.05%. Yes, so this is correct.
0.05. So we need one more
Yes.
9.
Yeah.
The bid is sent back on how much the guy will receive. Now,
Mhm.
sorry.
No, correct. Bits are sent by the routers, and
Yep.
user will select among these bits which are sent by the router.
Sure. So user will select the best one, which is given to him or her. Which realistically, I actually all should be same price because price is static in
Yes.
in Connext. So it's really maybe he'll choose the fastest one. I don't know. Then this bid is then relayed. This bid is then probably, so the user's next step is to deposit, right? And how
Yes.
I would construct this is to make these ones here smaller. So is it called deposit or is it called something else?
It's called prepare, the function called prepare, and this whole bit is one of the argument of the function.
Yep. So the bid item gets wrapped basically. It gets wrapped. It comes with a prepare is a function call on the smart contract that requires a transfer, basically to that particular kind of like escrow contract, so to speak.
Yes.
So it's kind of like this prepare function is actually implemented on the smart contract. It's basically one. It basically takes in this object, but it also does number one deposit
Deposits upon, yeah.
100 ETH,
Mhm.
and number two it saves bid info on, I don't know, do you guys use call? It has to be computationally. Does it have to be computationally? It has to be actually verified, right? So that a router signed it, right?
No, not really. What we do is that instead of like sending the whole bit, which is not really required on the prepare side, so what we do
Okay.
is that we only send the route, we only mention the router address. So
So
when the router is reading from Ethereum, in this case, it will see, okay, this bit is requested to me by the user, and then only it proceeds to create a prepare on the receiving side, which is the next step.
right.
Mhm. The bid and the bid signature was a verification of chain where we can verify that okay the correct router is sending this message because we are on a messaging layer where all the parties
So
are interacting with each
it's
other.
just used to ensure that you're talking to somebody who's not catfishing
Yeah,
you.
exactly. Yes.
Um, so and this is submitted by this one here is submitted by this one here is
Router.
submitted by router. So router
Yes.
submits this, and basically it goes. They also deposit an amount.
Yes. Similar to user, they are also depositing their amount in this contract with whatever the amount was promised to the user.
Number two, they have to take. Uh, so by depositing this
Transaction
fee,
fees.
let's see, what do they have to do? They can't let the user take it out just yet. So what they have to do
Right.
is they actually have to say something along the lines of, uh, they here's when they have to include the user's prepare, right?
No, so this
Not
is
yet.
basically on Ethereum chain user prepared, and now on Polygon the router is
I
preparing.
understand. I
In this
understand.
case,
But
yeah.
how? So right now I'm putting in like 99.9995 ETH for the user to
Mhm.
claim, right? The user can
Right.
actually technically only claim this once once he or she has chosen to. I'm thinking about the claiming rights for the user on the other side, right? When
Mhm.
can the user claim this, and when can the application claim the prepare on the ETH side? So
Right.
this one here, so this one here is prepare on Polygon, and it contains. I mean, it contains my deposit. It doesn't need to contain like the prepare that's on the other side to reference that because how is it okay let's just proceed. So what you're saying is it just needs deposit for now, and probably what, like it doesn't need the prepare address on the other side or the prepare function, prepare transaction.
Now, this is basically a prepare transaction which happened on Polygon, right?
I
Which is
know,
done
but
by
don't
the
need to
router.
Ethereum prepare on this side.
On ETH, no, I'm a bit confused.
Okay, then what else do you need to provide for this prepare?
Oh, okay. So as in Params, router basically deposits the money, and that's all. They basically because this in the whole bid, which is this in this we are mentioning user's address, we are mentioning router's address, who initiated the transaction, who is requesting the transaction, the receiver address. So there are a bunch of other params which are included in the arguments, and
So what's
that's
the
what
other price for Polygon?
um, uh, so, um, so it's similar to prepare on the deposit side. We will have user address, we will have receiver address. So once the router is creating this prepare on Polygon, it basically mentions that these funds which are deposited and logged into the contract are for this particular user. So for the next steps, what happens is that user comes in and provides a signature and checks that okay, this prepare which is created by the router is with suffice amount, and they are satisfied with it. And after that, they provide this signature to claim the funds, which we call, and this goes all in the function called fulfill. We have a function called fulfill where user comes in, provides the signature, and claims
Sorry,
the
what's it
fund.
called? What's the function called? Sorry.
Fulfill, fulfill.
And this contains signature of
Yes, a signature by the user.
on what?
uh, on for this particular transaction for the
Who's
prepare
submitting
to
this one?
claim
This is router or this
user
is so
user submits yes.
so Okay, and user submits this one on user submits fulfill on Polygon.
Right.
Yes or no?
Yes. Yes. This is a meta TX-able transaction. So user basically submits this signature and sends it to a relayer to finish the transaction.
Who else needs to sign it?
Only user. Only user needs to sign it to basically check that the amount which is prepared by the
But the
router is correct or
architecture
not.
right now uses a meta transaction to make it gasless.
Yes.
Okay.
So it is a meta TX-able transaction. So user basically provides the signature and then relayer basically relays it to the Polygon and complete the transaction.
Okay. So in this, I mean, this is a call to Polygon, right? So there's obviously user signature
Right.
wrapped on the object. What's the params?
It's similar to what we had in the prepare. Nothing additional, to be honest. We will just take user signature to just verify that whatever the params are, user is agreeing upon it.
So I mean router address basically.
It's a transaction ID. We call it transaction ID, which is basically
This is a reference to prepare, right?
yes. So this is how we track down that this. So basically, there are multiple prepares which are happening on both chains. So we have something called transaction ID, which is generated from the params which are provided to both of these functions, which are going to be common to common to both chains. And we generate a transaction ID from it, and that's how we check it. So this in here, user is basically doing a signature with the params, which includes transaction ID, and where we can prove that, and we can use that same signature on the Ethereum side here to actually claim the funds for the router. I know. I mean, this is like a jumble upon.
Fulfill gets called by user.
Mhm.
Add user here. So
Right.
user fulfills on Polygon, right? At this
Mhm.
point, he or she is at this point, he or she is does he or she withdraw the 100 ETH at this point?
Yes, they will receive the 100 ETH to the receiving address they have mentioned.
Um, takes ID from prepare, and then on the flip side, the router obviously needs to claim the user's prepare. So the router
Right.
itself will call fulfill.
Right. So router will call the fulfill on the Ethereum, and that requires the same signature which is sent by the user on the receiving side.
So
So
TXID, this requires TXID plus from
the
TXID of
signature by the
this
user.
one is router prepare.
Mhm.
And then this one is basically it needs a transaction ID from
Transaction
user.
ID is common in all of these. Transaction ID is common with in both the chains.
Okay, I'll get to
Uh,
that right after. So
yeah.
you're saying that this is the literal transaction ID, which is the same on both
Oh,
chains.
no. I think that is what the nomenclature we made a mistake with. This is what we call transfer ID basically, which is generated from the params which are provided during the prepare. So there are some common params which are basically user address, router address, and a couple of others which are not much relevant at this point. User address and router address, these are the with destination domain and origin domain. These are some of the things, and with the salt, which will be used to generate the transaction ID initially only. So transaction ID we generate during the bid only. So
It's a
once
non
we send the
included. It's a nonce included. Its transaction ID is included in the bid. So actually, this sends
Yes.
back TXID.
Yeah.
And TXID is hash of what goes into the prepare or what comes from the bid.
What goes into the prepare? So in prepare
So
only, the
100
sorry.
router address plus a nonce, some other
Mhm.
params plus a nonce, which is a salt. So are these included on the prepare transaction? So are those params included on the prepare transaction?
Yes, yes. These
So
are
there's
the
actually
params which are common in all of these functions.
so there's a salt there as well. And I'm assuming that also prepare for the router also has a salt.
Right.
And wait, are these these
Oh,
params are
sorry.
actually
So
imparams?
these salt which we are talking about, so okay. So the transaction ID which is generated, it happens only during the prepare, which is done by the user, and that same transaction ID is used all among on all of these functions. So we don't really have to generate the transaction ID on chain. This can happen off chain, which is happening with the current version, where we are generating the transaction ID while when the prepare happens by
But
the
all
user.
the information to the transaction ID needs to be submitted in the params of prepare, right? Although the transaction ID
Right.
can be created off chain, all of the parameters must be on user prepare, I'm assuming.
Yes. Yes.
So all of these parameters over here basically are used to create transaction ID, which is then
Mhm.
stated on router prepare on Polygon.
Right.
Is that correct? Is that
Yes. Yes, it is correct. Basically, using the same transaction ID.
okay? Okay,
That's
so
the underline of this.
right, so when the user fulfills, they take their transaction ID and they take and they basically withdraw, and they're able to receive the 100 ETH price down. Then
Right.
the router, what the router does is the router then tries to withdraw his ETH on the Ethereum chain.
Yes.
And what he or she does is he or she does transaction ID plus withdraw 100. Okay, is there anything else that happens on the router fulfill?
Router fulfill is basically where it uses the same signature which is provided by the user on the destination chain. That is going to be Polygon here. So the signature stays the same. So once user claims their fund, router can use the same signature to claim their funds on the Ethereum chain. Yes.
Okay, so so these are the steps. Okay, let's just walk through this. There has to be a time lock somewhere. Not time lock, but like
Yes.
time.
Yes. There is a
So
time lock and cancellation as well,
so
as in features.
right, yeah. So okay, so there are two vectors of attack here that this is safe from, which basically the first vector of attack um is basically if the user comes in, deposits 100 ETH on he does let's the user comes in, the user does user prepare on the Ethereum chain, but the router doesn't do router prepare on the Polygon chain. Then the user needs some way to be able to basically claim back that ETH after a certain period of time, because well the router isn't responding, um, and then that's one thing that needs to be done. The second thing that needs to be done is on the router side, if the router puts the prepare, likewise, the user needs to be able to, and the user doesn't fulfill, the router has like locked in liquidity there and needs to be able to take that liquidity out eventually and cancel that. So, so so basically user fulfill and router fulfill needs to be atomic. The prepares don't need to be atomic, but user fulfill and router fulfill needs to be atomic. Also, user fulfill needs to happen. There needs to be an ample amount of time window between user fulfill and router fulfill, such that a router can always withdraw once user has withdrawn, because it's always atomic. So the window between,
that's a very good point.
so
It's yeah, we have a time lock on the destination chain for 2 days,
okay,
and on the sending chain it's 3 days. So
okay,
if there is a griefing factor which user wants to attack on router, where it basically wants to lock the funds for the router, so in all the cases user will be suffering more with the additional 24 hours lock period. And if someone tries to, let's just fulfill, the user tries to fulfill the transaction on destination chain in the very last moment, but still router will have 24 hours to actually proceed with the fulfillment. So these are the time lock which are present on destination and origin and destination chain.
got it. So they only can call withdraw after basically on the receiving, which is the user side. Once you've prepared, this ETH is locked for 3 days, unless a fulfilled transaction comes true. And likewise,
Yes,
on the other side, it's 2 days locked, unless a fulfilled transaction on the user side comes true. Users can grieve for liquidity, but they are locked for 50% more time of the interest relative to router. Um, and there is a 24-hour window, which is just basically this minus this, where if a user, no, a user has to try to call user fulfill on this part. On a user only can call user fulfill within 2 days. A application cannot call router fulfill in 3 days. I mean, cannot call, as in cannot call a router fulfill without a user fulfill transaction. So
exactly.
a router always has at least 24 hours, because it's 2 day minus 3 days minus 2 days. That makes a lot of
Right.
sense. So the only way where we have maybe a slight, so like if we think about forking or anything like that, the only way where we potentially have maybe a slight issue is where maybe on the second day, we somehow force the user to submit it on to submit a transaction on the second day, which on the end of the second day, which on our fork doesn't is past the timeline. On theirs, it's through the timeline. You take their transaction in the mempool and then you spam it on the other side, and you get their 100 ETH, but they don't get the 100 ETH on this side because technically it's timed out.
Right.
Which is
Yeah,
not really.
that's a good. I mean, that's an attack factor which is possible in case where you have like a, because so why we have like SDK, why we have router, because these parties can actually have their own RPCs. They don't really
Mhm,
have to trust us in this case.
mhm,
So they are
mhm.
using their own RPC. Nobody is actually pushing them to actually to use some sort of a forked network RPC, and then can actually do this attack vector. So this is
100%,
not ideally possible.
and not just you guys
Yeah.
don't even have to go to that extent. At least in my opinion, like for
Mhm.
example, a very simple rule which just basically goes along the lines of, hey, like 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 don't submit it. The threshold is 2 days, but never submit a fulfill 1.5 days down the line. You have to do it like just block time, right?
Uh,
Like an ample amount of block time for you to uh, ensure that it's confirmed, basically.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, so cause we know that there are like multiple chains, because once we went to mainnet, we realized that there are multiple chains where the uncle blocks is happening. If we take the example of Polygon, it takes like, we have seen where the uncle or the fork is like how this uncle blocks are happening after like 120 blocks or 190 blocks. So to
Well, how long
ensure
is that?
these
120, 190, that's about
190 on Polygon would be like 2 minutes, 1 minute,
2 minutes.
one and a half. Yeah,
Mm,
because 2 seconds or 1.5 second is the broad block reducing time.
mm,
So yeah, I mean, so we realized that this is we have seen. So what we did is that we have safe confirmation of off chain. So
mm.
even when the router is making a prepare, we make sure that there is some time which is passed on the Ethereum, so that this fork doesn't happen and router doesn't actually lock their money and
Mm-hmm.
doesn't lose it. So these are some of the things which we make sure off chain which are happening.
Mm-hmm. I see. I see. I see. Okay. Yeah, sounds good. Makes a lot of sense as well. So this is a completely trustless system for those of you
Yes.
guys who are listening in. It's a completely trustless system. Basically, there's no middleman between the two parties. I think the only griefing vector is, I mean, the only vector is really griefing, and it's like you can lock up liquidity basically on both sides.
Yeah.
And you get punished more. So game theoretically, this also makes sense. Um, between these different interactions. And this is an example of trustless chain. Now, um, what are we've got this implementation it's live in prod. What TVL is it doing at this point? Or
It has done
volume?
like more than 1.5 billion till now.
Fantastic, 1.5 billion.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So 1.5 billion transferred between chains via the Connext protocol already, and that's amazing. Which means that that's like a substantial amount of fees. That's like if my math succeeds me, it's wow, it's like 100 million. Wait, no, it's 500 million in fees. That's crazy. It's a good amount of fees.
No, it's 0.05% for the routers. So it's
1.5 billion. Let's just
yeah.
yeah, 750 million in fees, right? Yeah. Am I doing my math wrong? No, it's 750 million fees. 1,000, right? Yeah, 750 million. Oh, crazy, huh? 750 million in fees. But what are some of the opportunities that we kind of like see here, or some of the issues that we can potentially with this current day system, uh, which is what which is what Amarok aims to fix?
Yes, really good question. So, uh, in this whole paradigm, what we are doing, like user have to wait significantly because it's waiting for the router side, and then we are assigning this single router when we are doing the transaction. So we are not using multi-router. We are not basically a multi-path where multiple routers can actually provide to the transfer size. And so even if the big transaction request is coming up, they can support it. And then there's the limit of the liquidity where supposing that if Polygon only, if there are multiple routers, the liquidity is segmented in between them. And then we have like maybe there are the total of all the routers which are available, maybe 1 million, 2 million of liquidity is available. Then also we are doing this bidding process which so okay, let's just I will just list down what are the current problems we are facing with user experience and the liquidity.
Yep.
So one thing is that user experience is not really good, as they have to wait for initially they have to do this bidding process off chain, which takes around like 6 to 15 seconds to finally get their bids. And in some cases, they don't even get a bid because the routers which are there, they don't really have the liquidity to support the transaction size.
Mm.
So first is user experience. Second is transaction and transfer size is very limited. Uh, Third would be liquidity segmentation
What do you mean
because
by
once
sorry, one sec. What do you mean by transfer size is very limited?
so suppose that you are coming with a request of 100 ETH. So that
Yep.
means there should be a router which have 100 ETH on Polygon, right?
So that's
But
the same
in
thing.
case
Liquidity limit, basically.
liquidity segmentation, what I meant by liquidity segmentation was there are two things like where we have multiple routers and liquidity segmenting between them. And there is another case where once you make this transaction happen, you the liquidity actually get it. We have to rebalance the liquidity because all the liquidity is now stationed at Ethereum. There is no more liquidity. I mean, the liquidity which was available was taken by the user. So now we have to rebalance somehow. So how to do that? We have to use some sort of a native bridge, or in the worst case possible, we have to use other bridges which are available, which are not trustless to actually rebalance. So that
Or,
is like the whole
or an exchange.
yeah, exactly. So that is the current problem. So we don't really have an option to actually wait for the users to come in, and because it depends on demand and supply. So there is not always the case where both the chains have the same demand and supply. So we need a way to actually do the rebalancing in a way where it doesn't cost the routers, because if we use other bridges or the native, either they have to wait for like lock time period. If I take the example of rollups, like 7 days, or they have to be like paying an ample amount of money to any other bridge to actually rebalance, which is very not really good.
Yep.
So these are the problems which were like the top end problems which we saw this past year of NXTP being live. With the
Okay.
high security, this was the price we were paying.
Hmm.
So we that's when we, because we knew that there will be some of these problems, but we wanted to go live with whatever the trusted minimized
Absolutely
solution which we
trustless
can offer
solution.
to the user. Yeah.
Yep.
So these are the like some of the status problem which we saw, and realized that we have to come up with a better system, and
Yep.
that's
So
when the Amarok was built.
let's dive into Amarok. So, uh, does Amarok fix all of these issues over here, or does it make does
It solves all of these issues, and it
fantastic?
gets much better. It gets
Let's
much better.
let's go into it. Let's go into it.
Yeah.
So you were telling me in Paris briefly about this thing called Nomad and how they're like a messaging protocol for between chains as well. Um, and and uh, and and I'm not sure exactly how Nomad works, to be honest. I haven't had the time to
Mhm.
read up on it just yet. But I mean, technically, Connext is also technically a messaging protocol between chains, technically.
Yeah.
So, but how are we? What are the key ideas around? Uh, you told me one of the key ideas around Amrock was um, what are key ideas around Amrock? You told me some of them was introducing Nomad, some of them was introducing an order book such that like you receive bids from one one central channel and it's faster. You told me a little bit about briefly about like with Nomad the slow liquidity and fast liquidity, and then so yeah, what are the key ideas here around Amarok?
Sure. Amarok is like a collaboration with Nomad.
Okay.
So I will give a brief introduction about Nomad. So Nomad protocol is basically inspired by roller mechanism, where it uses the theory of having a one by n uh, to actually for the trust minimization, not like having a validator. Even if
Mhm.
there is a single, so how, what is rollup? Rollup is basically in very essence, for a user to understand about the security. It's basically where if even if there is a single party which is acting honest, then also we can stop having any sort of problems, and we can stagnate the bridge and the chain itself to make sure that we get on the right path. So it's similar with the Nomad. So even if there is a single honest party in the system, then also we can stop any sort of spam or uh, any sort of activity happening, which can actually uh, give have the pro have get the routers or anyone who is providing the liquidity into issue or the users. So that is how it is getting trust minimized.
Right. And with Nomad, it's basically it's isn't it technically so the thing is I understand rollups because rollups basically operate on on a VM or on state um, on state and then validate that to one particular chain, right? How do you implement? So it's kind of like one way where it is. Um, it's kind of like one way where you talk about your VM being replicated on the layer one, um, and and But when you're talking about cross-chain communication, how does that how does that work when you talk about cross-chain communication? When you talk about like two different VMs, so is it still just one-way messaging, and then
Mm.
you use so like yeah, I mean perhaps maybe let's just take it as it is. We're not here just
Mhm.
necessarily to talk about Nomad. We talked
Yeah.
a little bit. Let's just accept the trade-offs as they are, and as let's say it manages to do some sort of cross-chain
Mhm.
communication.
No,
With
I will just maybe I will just give a brief idea because
Yep,
this is like a very core part of the protocol itself because
yep,
it's
okay,
like a sister fam because what they provide is a messaging layer
yep,
to so on Nomad now Connext is building as a liquidity layer which provides a fast and slow interaction which is more user facing in we are still infrastructure, but it's more user facing now in comparison to what Nomad is doing.
yep.
Again, this is all in collaboration, so I can go through in the deep, but I'll just try to because this is very complex to cover it in a very short time period how the Nomad exactly works. But I'll try to summarize it as best as I can. So if when we are talking about Nomad, what Nomad does is that again, it's inspired from the roll up. So that only tells you that actually tells you about the TLDR of the security.
Mm,
And so how does the Nomad works? Nomad have this home contract and a replica contract. So they we have these multiple agents available. One of them updater. Uh, we have watchtower. We have
okay,
routers, and
okay.
we have this actually covers the best. So we have watcher, updater, relay, and the processor. So
Mm-hmm.
what happens is that in like 30 minutes or in a fixed time of interval, there these requests comes to the home bridge, home contract, which is like the origin, and replica is the destination here. So
Mm,
once we have the messaging requests which are coming in, they have a function where you are sending the messaging request to that comes to the home. And now what the app updater does is that updater wraps it in a way where it creates a Merkle root of it, of
mm,
all the requests which came in. So
mm,
updaters is more or less like a notary, which
mm,
sees all these messages, created a Merkle root, creates a
mm.
Merkle root, and posts it on the home with its bond. So updater is basically staking some money where it says that this is what I have signed.
This is the proof.
So yeah, it is true. So that's how this notary works in the system. Updater posts this message. Now there's this window period of time where before getting accepted and attached to the Merkle root list, this block of Merkle roots which are present on the home, watcher and the other players in the system can actually check that if it is correct or not. So they are watching, and if it is not correct, they can actually request and stop that Merkle root to be attached to this block of Merkle root which is already available, and
Right.
then they can claim the bond money which is provided by the updater. So this is why the watchers are present, and watcher could be anyone, or even an adapt, which is actually just working with a
Right.
nomad or very far away. So anyone can be watcher. This is like a good actor of the system with an incentive to earn more. Uh, and that's how this Merkle root get attached to the list of blocks which are available. So once this is attached, now what happens is that there is this relay which basically sends the Merkle root to the replica. So what happens is that in this home and replica, there is
Sorry,
this
I
list.
just one pause.
Yeah,
The definition of home means like the initial chain that wants to send a message. The
right.
definition of replica is any other smart contract context. Is that correct?
Yes, any other smart contract which is available on possibly on the same chain or any other chain or any
Any
other
other
domain.
smart contract context, basically. Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so basically relay now sends this Merkle root. Once this Merkle root is attached to the list of blocks which was there, relay
Right.
sends it to the replica, and then replica have the same list of blocks. So
Right.
any system who is using any DApp or anyone else who is using Nomad, they can basically check that if they are same or not. And we already have Watcher where they are watching, where they have like 10 to 15 minutes of window time, a window period of time, uh, to actually verify if it is correct or not.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Right. Um.
And processor is like a way to actually, because we have Merkle roots available on both sides, so processor can be this message relay message system, which is like an off-chain acting agent, which provides the messages which are there, but it can be verified on the chain. So source of truth is home, and then you can go to replica where you are provided with the same information and can tally both of these chains to verify that if it is correct or not.
Right.
I think, and this is how I will summarize. I know I haven't touched the very depth of all the technical
So
parts
it's
here.
technically. So it's technically. Am I wrong in assuming it's a little bit like? It's a little bit like creating. The rollup is represented. The state of the rollup is represented by these roots that we're creating on home. These roots that we're creating on home are then being basically validated and relayed to a replica chain in some way. There's an
Exactly.
update. There's an update process. There's an update process on these roots that we actually need to trust on the replica chain. And this update,
Right.
so like this smart contract on the home chain needs to actually exist. And the replica chain has no way of actually knowing that, but we kind of like as individual outsiders look at it and think that yes, it's actually the case. Um, so actually, you could. So it's technically like implementing state on any smart contract layer, any VM actually. It doesn't even have to be a chain, right? It could be off chain even. Like as long as it has ample update rules, and then relaying that state root into replica chain. I guess if it isn't on chain, then you don't have ample updating rules because it doesn't follow a computation layer.
Right.
Uh,
Because that way you don't, because in blockchain, if you are on in any blockchain, so what you can do is that you can check the history, because that's how this is like a creating a mini blockchain into the contract itself, where you are
yeah,
actually have
yeah,
the track of all
yeah,
the Merkle
yeah.
roots which are available.
Yep, exactly. A minute state on the blockchain itself, where you
Yeah,
relay that minute state into different chains. And it's essentially like building a roll up, a computational layer VM roll up on a chain for the sole purpose
exactly.
of sending that route to the other chain, which then is actually the verifier. You can think of the replicate chain in this case is analogous to like ETH1, technically, in this case.
Right.
Uh, okay, interesting. Interesting. Um, sure. I kind of understand at a high level. Definitely a rabbit hole to dive into. Very interesting for
Yeah.
sure. Now let's talk about how this applies to Amarok. Um,
Yeah, let's jump into it. This is Nomad. So challenges for Nomad here is that it needs like 30 minutes to an hour to actually relay a message from one domain to another. And that's where Connext comes in. So what we are doing is that we are providing the fast layer of interaction which can happen uh, 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 between one chain to another. And the harmony between Nomad and Connext is so good, where uh, it covers the if whatever the challenges which were available, which were there for both the protocols, it covers up. And that's how this whole Amarok came into. So
mhm.
how does this happen? Basically, is that now what we are doing is that we have this Connext contracts which will be available. the earlier contracts we were calling transaction manager, not much relevant, but just just putting out the name out. So just changing the name. So what now is that instead of having this prepare and fulfill, which were there, so we had like three transaction process, three on-chain transactions were needed to be done for a user to actually complete this whole transaction. And like with the delay of time period and the reliance on a single router, where they have to be up. So this was another challenge which we were seeing, which we are seeing with the current one, where the other router, once the router is decided, it has to be there. Otherwise, there will be a griefing vector for the user. They have to wait. So what now happens is that instead of mentioning or doing any sort of auction, what with Amarok, what we are doing is that the multiple improvements which came in is that all the fees calculation will happen on chain only. The 0.05% which we were doing off chain will happen on chain only. And I haven't talked much about the transaction, how the transaction fees charge in NXTP v0. It basically, we are basically charging with the amount you are sending. So if you are sending the stable coins, this all that fees is charged in the stable coin only. But with Amarok, what happens now is that this function is called xcall on the origin chain here, Ethereum. So you will have this function called xcall, where you will mention the origin, destination, again, whatever the amount you want to request here. And so these all get mentioned with the xcall.
Okay, let's step into the process. What stays the same? So instead of so it's becoming an auction. So instead of requesting to each of the routers, right? Instead, I as a user call xcall. Is it?
Yeah, direct on-chain interaction. No need for any off-chain interaction now.
So so xcall. So
yes,
I as a user call xcall, and it's the same. It's the same parameters as what I wanted for this bid. Is it? So like this stuff.
Yes, we will just talk about the basics ones. I can talk about like the advanced ones in later. But initial ones are basically where you are mentioning origin domain, destination domain. You are mentioning the amount and the transaction asset you want.
Yeah. So basically, these things that we we listed before. Okay.
Right. And in this, now you will, so what you have to do is that the fees for the relay, this all is going to be meta TXable. So once you create an xcall, all the transaction which will happen other than this by the user will be all meta TXable. To pay the relay, we will.
Does the xcall, so this is meta xable, sure. Does the xcall include a deposit, or is it just really a request at this point?
This will include the deposit.
Okay.
We basically get the money from the user, and yeah.
Yep. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So once this deposit happens, yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
No. So the deposit basically replaces both the bid as well as the first user prepare, basically, because so it's all on ETH. So now I'm assuming the routers just take a look at the ETH chain for these bids and see if they want to fulfill them.
Right.
And I can even choose to just fulfill a portion of a bid because it's all computed on chain.
Right, but before so to actually avoid a racing between the routers.
Yep.
What we have now is that there is a process which is we will have this entity which will be called sequencer. Initially, we will have a very decentralized way of dealing with that, but for now we will have a centralized way of selecting the bids, because now all the fees will be calculated on chain, so we don't really have to worry about the verification needed to be done by the user, because whatever the amount is provided by the user, that needs to be satisfied and completed on chain only. So that should be the exact amount which is sent. So in this case, what happens is that routers will be sending their bits to the sequencer, and
Okay.
sequencer is the one which will post the bit on the polygon. So so I'll just name the function, so it would be easy to relate. So
Sounds
the
good.
function which is where the user is actually passing their money is called xcall.
Yes.
The function name is xcall there, and on Polygon we have execute.
And this is only called by. This is basically only called by. So router sends bit to sequencer,
Mm-hmm.
and okay, let's get into what is in that later. But
Right.
router sends bit to sequencer, and then you're saying that this one is called execute with just an X to be cool.
It's execute. EXCECUT.
Not just not like X call execute. Okay, never
Yeah,
mind.
we want to do the better naming with this. I'm still figuring out. Okay, this xcall sounds cool, and now we are not following that whole thing. Like, oh, this is a bummer.
This is called by sequencer, is it?
Yes, this is basic. So what happens? Sequencer is like it's only a selection. It's an off-chain infra where the selection happens only. The process which we were doing auctioning, which was taken care by the SDK user, where it was selecting every time. Instead of that, what happens now is that these hundreds of routers which are available, they will be sending their bits to sequencer, and a sequencer will select and create this on-chain ready transaction request and send it
Okay.
to the relayer. That's
Okay.
what the
So
sequencer is doing.
I see. So sequencer, so execute. So router, wait. So router send bid to sequencers, and bid, I'm assuming
Right.
by what you just said, is actually just like it's probably just origin, destination, domain, and origin and destination domain, um, and then it's amount that the router wants to put, right?
No. This time amount will stay the same, like the one which is provided by the user.
Okay. So it doesn't
Because
contain.
that's how the so this time the transfer ID is generated on chain only. Like earlier, it was sent initially with the function itself, but the
Yes.
transfer ID this time will be generated on chain only, and that will
Okay.
be done by using the arguments. So the arguments which are provided during the xcall,
Okay.
there is. Mhm,
Got it.
mhm. See, we
Um,
also have nonce and other stuff, which is like on chain only. We put it in, so we know that okay, which transaction is this one. We have lists of transactions which are happening on the origin chain, and then we are providing that same information on the destination chain.
got it. Okay. So wait. So
Right.
then router sends bit to sequencer. So router sends bit to sequencer. What's in this bit to the sequencer? Can it
Uh,
be fractionalized amounts, or is it like only? Does
yes.
it have to reference TX IDs?
It will be a fractionized amount. So router in this case, router is basically sending a amount and a
Mm-hmm.
signature.
Mm-hmm.
The signature allows
Destination domain, destination origin as well.
sorry.
Destination like that you're going to deposit to as well. We're talking about the bid that routers will send to sequences. Inside it, you
Right.
say there's amount, there's probably asset as well, and then there's also
Mhm.
probably the destination that you want to send it to, right?
Yes, but that was a part of the X call, so that can't be changed. So things like amount, origin,
So you refer to
destination.
do you refer to a TX ID here?
Mhm.
Do we refer to a TX ID inside? It's saying that. Sorry, I'm just trying to understand what we are sending to. What do routers send to the sequencer?
Okay, so I can like actually deep dive into like what are the params look like, if that
Okay.
helps, because like we can talk about. I just didn't want to go like in very deep depth of it, but actually maybe a good idea would be to actually jump right into it. Yes, this is the one. It's called handler call params. and then we have this X call. Yeah, this is the one. So
Mm,
X call arguments is the one which are the arguments for the X call here when we are sending it. These are
mm,
still subject to change. We are adding more. We are still working on some of the really cool features which are coming in. So it will
mm,
be an additional cool features. But if we just talk about the params above, that those are the requirements which will be sent by the users
mm,
in Xcall. So this is we have two address where we, and this is like the further interaction which can take place, like on permission
mm,
and all. So we can talk about that later, but like touching the very surface of it, and the call params which are available there. So the main one are here is that to address, which is going to be where the funds will go, origin domain, destination domain,
mhm.
and yeah, these are the two three fun this is the part of the call params which stays the same. And
Okay.
as you can see, we are not sending any sort of transfer ID in it. A transfer
Yep.
ID will be generated on chain.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah,
Um,
so we mentioned transaction asset ID, amount, and relay fee. That's all.
so that explains the X call, but what's
Mhm.
sent to the sequencer?
What's sent to the sequencer, there we are sending execute params. So this
Okay.
in execute params, same call params are included,
So
which
what
were
is
sent during the X call. The
okay?
same call params will be included.
So it's literally just these things again, which is an execute,
Yeah, yes.
which is also sent to the router.
Which is, yeah, that would be a part of the execute param
And
arguments.
this is signed on by router. And is that true? And then we execute with the same params. Sequencer calls execute with what? With with this in an array.
Yeah, let me share the schema with you again on Telegram. So we
Oh,
can talk about the multipath there, possibly.
okay. Okay.
Yep.
So execute arg schema. Okay.
Yeah.
Uh, router signatures, amount, nonce, origin sender, relay fig. Got it. So basically, the sequencer's job is to aggregate routers and their corresponding addresses to verify against, and a total amount to a origin sender, which I assume is somebody who sent the X call.
Very correct. Very correct. You have attached all the pieces in the puzzle.
Okay.
So
So
uh, yeah.
so so sorry. Oh shit. Okay. So I'm just gonna replace this with
Mhm.
okay. So got it. So the sequencer basically aggregates all of the bids which are sent by the router,
Mhm.
um, routers, and routers committed to their bid by the signatures. Now routers
Right.
naturally to now routers naturally have to still somewhat they still have to deposit in some way, right? Or is their money already in the contract that is deposited
Their
and then
money is already in the contract.
their money is already in the
They,
contract? Okay.
yeah.
So beforehand, um, contract on destination chain.
Yes.
Beforehand, router submits liquidity to contract on destination chain. So actually it's just now two calls because it's just X call, and then the sequencer will aggregate like bids and then submit this call, and the user can then call fulfill basically afterwards.
There is no need to fulfill. In execute call only, user will receive the money.
I
So
see.
there is
So
no two steps at all.
So Origin sender will just send it to this address automatically, basically.
The to address, which is the origin sender, is basically for other features. So let's just ignore origin sender for now. But in
Also,
call params, we have this
I
to
see.
address.
Yeah. So this is call params schema. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So so it's just sent to the guy who submitted this, which should be in call parent schema. Like there will be address. Yeah. Got it. So so this basically allows us to and this is it.
This
So
is it.
what are the attacks here? The attacks here are potentially the router who submitted liquidity can sign this message, get included in the execute call, take out the liquidity, and they can grief, but they won't be able to. What happens if that happens? So how does the router claim their 100 ETH on the other side?
Good question. So what happens now is that you don't really have to claim the funds on ETH now, because this is where the Nomad comes in. So when you were using Nomad, you have to wait for an hour to actually receive your money. So instead of that, Connext is providing you a fast path where you can claim your funds in like a minute or two. And routers will be waiting for an hour to actually receive their money back on the destination chain through Nomad.
Got it. So wait. So you have a slow version and a fast version. The slow version is going through Nomad. So Nomad basically, and Nomad is a messaging layer. Our understanding of the properties of Nomad is it's a messaging layer that can relay a message from one chain to another trustlessly, according to one honest operator. Is it a transaction? Does Nomad submit a? How does Nomad replicate state on the replica chain? It sends over. This is a transaction. Is that true?
Yes, you can say that. So as of now, also Nomad have this what if we are using Nomad. So what we are doing is that we are doing a deposit on home in case it's the canonical asset. That's where it was initiated. So there you can make a deposit. It will be locked and the tokens will be minted. That will be through the messaging layer, where you are sending the request, where you want to like mint the function, mint the tokens into this separate contract using this another contract system, and they call it mad assets. Yeah.
Wait, so there's minting here. So it's not one for one anymore. It's now minting.
Now you have the functionality of both lock and mint. Where you can initiate if so there are some new chains which are coming in, and then this can be the official bridge. You don't really need any native bridge for that particular chain, and you can connect to all the existing chains as well. So this is like the very cool feature which will be there for all the chains. But coming back to it, you will have a fast path where you can do like a very quick transaction in a minute or two, and then you have this slow path where you don't really have any limit for the transfer size, and then you can go beyond it. Like if the router doesn't support the liquidity to whatever the transfer size you are requesting, maybe 1,000 ETH or something, then you can go through the lock and mint process, where you will get your funds in like an hour or so, but you will get your funds.
There's a lot of new concepts here. So,
yeah.
There's the lock and mint. There's
Mm-hmm.
there's slow and fast, and
Mm-hmm.
there's nomad.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in your typical case, in your standard case, well, let's take a step back. In your standard case with the sequencer, right? When the sequencer calls execute, it basically allows you to. It basically sends the user's 100 ETH, right?
Right.
Because calling it on the call, and that 100 ETH was what the router the router
Had.
um, had. Now, how does the router claim what his reward, or like basically how in the default case, how does I don't know whether default is fast or slow. Maybe let's
Oh,
just
right,
talk
right, right. Yeah,
how does
I should have mentioned it. Yeah.
how does the
So,
router
uh,
call?
what happens is that in this case, when the user creates an X call, this message is already going through Nomad. We are using the messaging layer to actually update that, okay, this request is sent by the user. So, and this will take like an hour or so to reach on the other side. So what happens is that we have this, so Bridge will be using the Nomad as a messaging layer, will be sending this message from, which is basically Xcall to Polygon. And in this, so what happens is that once a user initiate this request, it is sent through the messaging. And if the fast path was taken, that means that if the router actually completed the request for the liquidity and the transaction, then this once the messaging reaches, we will check on contract, okay, if the router actually completed that transaction or not. If it was completed by router, then we will return the money to the router. And if it is what it wasn't completed by the router, then we will send the money to the user.
This is on ETH or Polygon?
This is happening on Polygon.
So okay, so let me try to recite it back to you. So user calls xeth in the typical case, xcall. Xcall is both recognized by the routers. At the same time, it is sent through Nomad from Ethereum to
Yes,
Polygon.
right.
The router, the sequencer, then aggregates the bids that are taken from the routers, and using the router's signatures, they are given using the router signatures. They call execute on Polygon, which gives two things: users their money. It basically gives users their money. That's what it
Yeah,
gives.
yeah.
And 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 then if the sequencer doesn't do this and the routers don't do this, this xcall params will arrive through Nomad to Polygon and basically allow them to withdraw 100 ETH anyways out of the contract.
Right.
Um, so for the user, that's the fast way, which is through the sequencer and
Mhm.
execute, and the slow way, which is done through Nomad. Now,
Yeah, so in that case also what we this there is this third function called reconcile, and this
okay,
reconcile function can be called by the bridge only, which is basically the messaging system, a nomad.
okay,
So this reconcile happens. So in the reconcile only, we basically check that if the fast liquidity, if the fast path was taken or not. If the fast
right.
path was taken, then
And that's
we
just
when
basically via transaction IDs and call params. You hash it and you basically see whether it's done or not. Uh,
right, right. So we
understood.
have this all the records are stored on contract only, where we are
Understood.
saving that, okay, if this transfer ID was fulfilled by the router or not.
Understood. Understand. I can see the I can see the fast and slow case for the user, but I still don't know how the router withdraws. Does the router withdraw on Polygon? Does the router withdraw on Ethereum?
Router will receive back their money on Polygon.
How does the router receive back their money on Polygon? Router submits. So let's say we have 100 routers, right? Each submit 100 ETH, right, onto the Polygon contract. User X calls on Ethereum for 100 ETH. Execute gets called. There's 100 ETH out of the Polygon contract. How does the router withdraw 100 ETH?
So when this execute happens, there we are storing the record that for this particular transfer ID, this router we have taken out 100 ETH from this particular router, right? So this is something which is already stored as a state in Polygon contract. Once once this message is sent from Ethereum to Polygon, this message includes the request of the user. Yeah, through Nomad. Through Nomad, we are sending this message from Ethereum to Polygon, where we are saying that this is the X call which is created by the user as a request. There in contract, we are checking that, okay, if the fast path was taken, fast path was taken, this router gave out the money. So let's, so now router will be given money, given back its money on Polygon.
On Polygon?
Yes.
But then there's now 200 worth of ETH on Polygon.
No. But that 100 ETH was given out to the user, right?
So yes, 100 ETH was given out to the user. But okay, so let's say in our whole system, right, we have routers on Polygon, and all of the routers only have 100 ETH in total.
Okay.
Let's say for simplicity's sake, right, there's only one router, and it's 100 ETH, and the user calls for the user submits 100 ETH on Ethereum and asks for 100 ETH on Polygon.
Right.
And so is it like a mint? Does the user get a mint? Is that why?
No, because router already had the 100 ETH. So router will give its 100 ETH to the user.
Okay.
Through execute. So once execute happened, all the funds which were there for the router is actually giving it to the user. Now router doesn't have any money. Through the messaging layer, we check that router actually gave out its money for the fast path. So we verify that, and now we give this money back to the router, which is coming through the slow path.
What money?
So when the slow path is taken, what we are doing, we are actually so when we are doing the slow path, that means X call which happened, we are minting the tokens on the destination side. In any case, if the slow path is taken or the fast path, so we are locking the money in the contract and we are minting it on the Polygon. And once this is happening, so this is for the canonical one. In other cases, there will be burn and mint.
I see.
Where you are talking about Polygon to optimism.
That's where the lock and mint comes. So this side is locked with 100 ETH. This side had 100 ETH. Now the 100 ETH went out of the ecosystem, and now you reward your routers with 100 ETH that was minted, WETH or whatever.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
And once you are going back to Polygon to ETH, that time you will be burning the token on Polygon and unlocking it on the Ethereum.
Yeah, and that happens either in the execute or in the X call, which happens afterwards. Yeah.
Right.
Actually, it can actually happen in the execute, right? The execute actually can give routers money at the same time.
In case of Ethereum, Polygon to Ethereum?
Yeah.
No, but we will still need a message from in trustless way to verify that, this transaction was done on Polygon. That is what we are waiting for on either Ethereum or Polygon. Through the slow message, we are basically waiting that, this is the information we can trust. Basically, the router contract and trust.
Right. So there are no time locks required here because we're just basically trusting the message from Nomad.
Right.
And sequencer and the router system is just designed to make it faster for
Yes.
users.
Yes.
Okay. I see. Wow, the trust assumptions are really relied on Nomad. I have to look at this a little bit more.
Yeah, I understand your point where you can say that we are relying because as I said, Nomad is trustless because
Yeah.
there is even if a single sorry for the background noise. So even if there is a single party which we can check that okay because any single party which comes in and they can verify that okay if this message is something we can trust or not, and these watchtower will are hosted by us or the dApps which are building us. So that is what we say that you don't really have to trust the information. That same goes for the rollup where you are you don't trust the optimism chain or arbiter. You can host your watchtower to make sure that whatever the information which is mitigated to Ethereum or coming on chain, you can verify it. And that's what is like the whole ecosystem is about RPCs and this whole assumption that if you are working with a chain, particular chain, you can trust it. That's what is you are using RPCs to actually read that information. So these are the blocks which are there. These are the building blocks which we are using. So in this case, as I said, we are building upon this messaging layer. We of course we are checking that the message which is coming from one chain to another is something which can be used or not, and that is where the watchtower will come in place. So in the half hour time of period or an hour time of period when this message is relayed from Ethereum to Polygon, we will have watchtower verifying the information that this X call, the X call which is going through and uh, adopted in the Merkle root is if the message is correct or not, and then we will be putting out a verification on Polygon as well, where we are checking that the information which is relayed using the relay in the Nomad system, the Merkle root which is posted here, is something which is true or not. So there are systems where this is like an infrastructure where uh, the dApps doesn't have to trust us. They can host their own watchtower. They can have they can verify if it is true or not, and can actually stagnate the whole bridge or the Merkle root which is coming in place.
Right. 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 I mean, it all sounds very good. Uh, it's very interesting. Very interesting. I think it's. I mean, I think if the assumptions are correct, it's really a lot better. We get we get aggregation for the users. I see how it's just one transaction now for the user, so it feels just like a standard swap, literally, because this is
Right.
called by the sequencer right after. So it's just two sequential transactions. I also see how aggregation is solved with liquidity. The routers just submit this into the sequencer, and the sequencer just chooses which ones they use so that you can amalgamate and handle large transaction sizes. Um, and I also, and yeah, the sequencer eventually does need to be perhaps, uh, well, basically, maybe, I mean, it is a point of failure in that, like, a sequencer can be, and therefore a sequencer needs to be potentially replaceable. But do we really need more than
Yeah.
one sequencer? I don't know.
Yeah,
Uh,
we want to go like fully decentralized, and for that only we have this we have done the token announcement, which is called Next
right,
tokens,
right,
and that's where it's coming into place, where the routers will have their own ecosystem, where each of them will participate as a sequencer and get the bits from all the routers, select what is the best one, and send it to the chain. So in
and
this
they'll do
case, we will have
Watchtower,
this
right?
staking. Sorry.
Well, do they do Watchtower and Nomad validation as well? One day I'll try spamming 100 X calls and see what people do.
You can actually do that with amount zero. So the new features which are there allows you to actually put the amount zero, and
Uh,
then you can spam doing the xcall. But in
uh,
that case also, the way it is written, that because if the value is zero, so router doesn't really have any incentive to complete this transaction. So if
mhm,
you create like xcall, so there is no way to actually have, there is no time lock, there is no cancellation. So once you create a xcall, in any way possible, because this is the great thing about it, like the 3 days time of wait period, it's not there. But now, so once you create an xcall, it will get completed in a minute or an hour
mm,
max.
mm.
So even if you spam, it wouldn't really matter.
Okay. I mean, it makes sense. Yeah. Uh, yeah. I mean, I was thinking that maybe like some invalid X calls, and see how, see how Nomad
Yeah,
handles.
yeah.
See how. No, but I'm sure it's. As in, I can see. As in, it basically all relies on Nomad, and I can see how if Nomad works, it just works, and I can see how Nomad
No,
could
Nomad
potentially.
is basically like a messaging. Nomad will be used as a messaging relay. So whatever the information you are actually providing during xcall, that will be mitigated. That will be sent to Polygon. But on the Polygon side, we have.
Are updaters in Nomad permissioned or?
Uh, um, I think they are as of now, but they are trying to move the position where they don't really have to like whitelist the updaters and stuff.
Right, right. Actually, it'd be great if the nodes, like the Connext nodes, just did. I mean, your routers just did the updaters work as well. It would make sense for them to do the updaters work.
Yeah, I mean, it's like we have to find out the symphony in all these agents which are there, and what
Yeah.
is the best action process of action should be there for these. But the ideal world would be where this is decentralized, where no whitelisting is required, and anyone can actually go ahead and participate as an updater, because this will involve the staking. So we can make sure that okay. Uh, nobody is actually just coming in and posting as a notary, because once you post your notary, you have to put in some bond amount, and that's
Right.
where the updaters like reputation, as well as the, the the fact that they can lose the money, which will come in.
Right. 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 Yeah. Cool. Well, I think we're running short on time.
Yeah,
I think we've overshot. Um,
yeah.
um, yeah, no. I think I understand Amarok, Nomad, as well as the upgrades which are coming. It's very different, actually. It's completely different from.
It's very
Uh,
different and very powerful, because this is like a public infrastructure, so anyone can actually come in, participate as a router. Anyone can come in, participate as a watchtower. So this is the free ecosystem where you can actually, because there is a still whitelisting to make sure that there are not like 1,000 and 2,000 of people are coming in at initial time, like
yeah,
at the very first day, and we are not able to actually have the communication proper. That's why the whitelisting exists as of now. But anyone is welcome into the ecosystem. They can participate. There are incentives provided. But the next
incrementally
part,
is the way to go. Incrementally is the way to
yeah,
go.
exactly. And the features which are provided here is that if you jump onto the call params, you can see that you will have this call data provided, so you can actually execute 2-3 transaction in a single transaction, which is initiated from Ethereum as only, or Polygon. So
Mm,
if you can actually do some sort of a like Uniswap swap in a single transaction which is initiated. So the
mm,
execute, once the execute is sent, you can do any sort of transaction. There are already projects which are building NFT bridge using this.
uh, Look
So
at this
the
tree.
amount could be zero.
bro. Look at this scope creep, man.
Exactly. You can we have this there are like multiple things which can be done. We have callback. So what you can do is that you can send a request from Ethereum. It goes to a contract, it execute. It could be like Uniswap execution, it could be Chainlink execution, Aave execution. Basically, Aave 3 portals, we will be using this to actually provide multiple functionality. But I can come back to that later. But callback actually allows you to receive the message back from the Polygon. So assume that you initiate this X call from Ethereum. There's a couple of functions which are executed on Polygon, and then from Polygon you will get this message back on contract itself. There you can check that, okay, if my transaction was successful or not. So you can have DAO to DAO interaction, metaverse to metaverse.
You can have it back and forth. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Cross-chain messaging where you can have back and forth.
Yeah, it's
That's
powerful.
immensely powerful. Yeah.
It's powerful. Definitely very powerful. I love it. Yeah, no, thanks so much for the time, Sanchay. Really appreciate you coming on here. Your content sounds fantastic. And you're coming down to Singapore soon, so let me know when you're in town. We'll grab a meal. There's a lot of nice places to eat here. And no, thanks so much for the time, Sanchay.
Thank you very much for having me. It was great. I had a good time.
Always a pleasure. Okay.